Ready? Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravikacharya Ashtoshar Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pravikacharya Ashtoshar Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Ananti Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Sama Veda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So today I would like to read from Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter, text 7. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vichittatma jitendriya sarvabhutatma bhutatma kurvanapi nalipyate. Translation. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Purport. One who is on the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness is very dear to every living being, and every living being is dear to him. This is due to his Krishna consciousness. Such a person cannot think of any living being as separate from Krishna, just as the leaves and branches of a tree are not separate from the tree. He knows very well that by pouring water on the root of the tree, the water will be distributed to all the leaves and branches, or by supplying food to the stomach, the energy is automatically distributed throughout the body. Because one who works in Krishna consciousness is servant to all, he is very dear to everyone. And because everyone is satisfied by his work, he is pure in consciousness. Because he is pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Because his mind is always fixed on Krishna, there is no chance of his being deviated from Krishna. Nor is there a chance that he will engage his senses in matters other than the service of the Lord. He does not like to hear anything except topics relating to Krishna. He does not like to eat anything which is not offered to Krishna, and he does not wish to go anywhere if Krishna is not involved. Therefore, his senses are controlled. A man of controlled senses cannot be offensive to anyone. One may ask, why then was Arjuna offensive in battle to others? Wasn't he in Krishna consciousness? Arjuna was only superficially offensive because, as has been already explained in the second chapter, all the assembled persons on the battlefield would continue to live individually, and the soul cannot be slain. So spiritually, no one was killed on the battlefield of Kurukṣetra. Only their dresses were changed by the order of Krishna, who was personally present. Therefore, Arjuna, while fighting on the battlefield of Kurukṣetra, was not really fighting at all. He was simply carrying out the orders of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. Such a person is never entangled in the reactions of work. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnana Jana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha. So, it says here that a Krishna conscious person is very dear to every living being, and every living being is dear to him. So why is that? It's because he possesses good qualities. A person in Krishna consciousness, he possesses all good qualities of that of a demigod. He's very tolerant, he's very patient, he's honest, and he's forgiving, and the most important quality is his humility. It says that a person, what opens the door for knowledge is humility, or his humbleness. Because if a person is too puffed up or proud, it closes the door for more knowledge. And you can practically see this when you ask somebody, you know, when one of my main services here at the temple is book distribution. And you hear a lot of people say, no, I know everything. But when you actually ask them questions, they don't know. What is the difference between spirit and matter? What is the difference between the soul and the body? What happens at the time of death? These are the essential questions that I like to ask people when I'm out on book distribution. And a good percent of the people that I meet, they don't know how to answer these questions. They may be highly educated in material, what Srila Prabhupada calls a materialist science, you know, how to make money, how to make business deals and this and that. But when it comes to spiritual topics, they have no idea how to answer them. In the Nectar of Devotion, it says, on the other hand, a person who is not in Krishna consciousness has no good qualities. He may be highly educated from the academic point of view, but in the actual field of his activities, he can be seen to be baser than the animal. So, and it says, even though a person is highly educated academically, if he cannot go beyond the sphere of mental activities, then he is sure to perform only material activities and thus remain impure. There are so many persons in the modern world who have been highly educated in the materialistic universities, but it is seen that they cannot take up the movement of Krishna consciousness and develop good qualities. And then there's another example, a Krishna consciousness boy, even if he's not very educated in the university or anything like that, he can immediately give up 4 sinful activities, which are illicit sex, no gambling, no meat eating, and no intoxication. Whereas those who are not in Krishna consciousness, although very highly educated, are often drunkards, meat eaters, sex mongers, and gamblers. These are practical proofs of how a Krishna conscious person becomes highly developed in good qualities, whereas a person who is non-Krishna consciousness cannot do so. There's a story that I heard when Maharaj, my spiritual master, His Holiness Badrinarayan Swami Maharaj, he went to go see a professor in a university. And a professor or a teacher, they should have qualifications. And when they went to see this professor at his hotel or apartment, they found him stumbling around and he was intoxicated. And he couldn't answer the question, so they had to reschedule another appointment. So that shows you that even in the material sphere, there are so many people that consider themselves to be very highly educated, a gentleman. But when you study his qualities, he's no better than an animal. And a devotee, he's honest, he's not lazy, he's compassionate. And so in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shikshastakam, one of his, he says, one should be more humble than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree. And what does that mean? A grass is very humble. Everyone steps on it, everyone, they don't pay attention to it. But what does it do? After it falls, it rises back up. So it's very tolerant, or more humble. And then the example that's given is a tree. A tree goes through so many difficulties, the hot sun, the freezing winters, and also when people carve their names, J plus H or something like that. They tattoo their initials on them, but they don't protest. And also, a tree is very giving. It doesn't matter who comes to the tree, it will provide shade, it will provide nourishment if it's a fruit tree. So we can learn from these instructions. And a devotee is also important because he can impart spiritual knowledge to the conditioned souls. When I go out on book distribution, a lot of people look at me like, what will these books do for me? So I tell them these books, they help you develop good qualities. And not only that, but this Bhagavad Gita, it teaches the art of living and the art of dying. And the art of dying, that sounds very nice. How can you transcend this material world, not only in this life, but you'll have a bright future? And there's a misconception that a lot of people think by doing good activities, you can reach Vaikuntha, or the spiritual world. But you can only reach the heavenly planets. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that these heavenly planets, they're still material. It's where you burn off your good karma, and then after that you come back to this planet, earthly planet. And Srila Prabhupada says that this is actual detachment, because without attachment we cannot actually be detached from this material world. And he uses the example of a family man. A family man, he may renounce his family connection, but if he has no better connection and no better attachment, then he will feel, I was better in family life. I have done a mistake. So you can see a lot of sannyasis, they may take to sannyas, but they fall back down. In the Bhakti Rasam Sindhu, it says, when one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts anything in relation to Krishna, one is highly situated above possessiveness. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. And it says that he knows that every living being is part and parcel of Krishna. He knows that within the core of the living entity's heart is Krishna as a Paramatma, the super soul. And when you go on book distribution, that's how I like to see the people that I meet. They may be in the lower modes of nature, passion, ignorance, or even material goodness, but I try to see that within the core of the heart is Krishna, and He's guiding them to my table, so I should try to say something to them, which will stand out. And Srila Prabhupada uses this example that a servant of a king, as when he knows his position, he can enjoy the same facilities as the king. He can eat with the king, he can travel with the king. Basically, he's living like a king. But when that servant decides to be the enjoyer, he loses all good. He loses his intelligence. He wants to be the enjoyer. He wants to take the position of the king. But that servant, that's not his constitutional position. So similarly, we are all servants of Krishna. The dharma of the soul is to serve. We're serving somebody, a child, a parent, a loved one. And Prabhupada says, if we don't want to serve anybody, we get a pet cat or a pet dog and we serve them. So instead of serving God, we want to serve an animal. And this morning, when we went to La Jolla Cove, I saw this couple. They were pushing a stroller, and I was thinking, oh, maybe they have a child. And when I looked inside, it was a little dog. So people, they have to serve. That's our nature. But ultimately, when we want to perfect our service, we turn towards Krishna. And everything belongs to Krishna, and that is Vishuddhatma. And Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, I am the only enjoyer, the only proprietor, and the best friend. And Srila Prabhupada asks, who is a thief? So a thief, he thinks something is his. But ultimately, everything belongs to Krishna. And I met this one gentleman. I asked him, where does these trees belong to, or where does it grow from? He says the ground. And I told him, where does the earth come from? And so he was thinking scientifically, this and that, but I told him it comes from God. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says these 8 energies of mine, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego, these are my energies. So we should know where everything comes from. And Srila Prabhupada, he likes to use the example of a bank cashier or a teller. Millions of money, millions of dollars are going through him, but he knows it doesn't belong to him. So similarly, a devotee, although he may use some type of material item, he knows that everything should be used in Krishna's service. That's proper renunciation. And it says that a devotee is pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. What gives me what I like to think about is during japa, the residents here in the temple, we chant japa from 5:15 to 7:15. So it gives us 2 hours to chant nice japa. And we chant 16 rounds, or those that are initiated or aspiring to be initiated, we chant at least 16 rounds. And so at that time, what is the mind thinking of? Is it thinking of breakfast? Is it thinking of this and that? Maharaj, when he sees a devotee, talking too much or he's kind of just doing his own thing, he would actually stop him. And he would say, this is japa time. So he would chastise him. And I like that because japa time is the best time to perform spiritual activities when the mind hasn't been agitated yet. And it says, since his mind is controlled, therefore his senses are also controlled. There was a pastime of, I guess he was in a high position in Europe or something. And he asked the disciples, can you make me a Brahmin? So the devotee said, yes, of course. So they told him what he couldn't do, the 4 regulative principles. And this man, he said, impossible. Because if you look around here in Pacific Beach, every corner there's a liquor store, every corner there's a restaurant, every corner there's, you could buy lotto tickets, and then everywhere you go they sell intoxication, some form of intoxication, whether it's alcohol or drugs, things like that. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the senses are superior to dull matter, and the mind is higher than senses, and above the mind is the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul. So the soul is completely separate from matter, and we should always remember that. And it says that his mind is always fixed on Krishna. when I first started Krishna consciousness, I really loved the Bhagavad Gita. And I was thinking, how can I always think of Krishna? And when I read the 10th chapter, The Opulence of the Supreme, it gave us details on how we can see Krishna. I am the pure taste in water. I'm the light of the sun and the moon. And what I like is when Krishna says, I'm the ability in man. Every person has a talent, whether it's reading, whether it's drawing, whether it's this and that. And he may be brilliant, but you should know that's coming from Krishna. And you could basically see this every day. We drink water, we honor prasad. And so the vegetables, they get their taste from the moon, and Krishna says, I'm the moon. And in the Vedas, they say that the sun and the moon are actually the eyes of Krishna. So we can never escape Krishna. There was this pastime, a teacher, he told his students, he gave them a piece of fruit, and he told them, go hide somewhere and eat this, where someone is not looking. And so the students, they went out, they hid in a cave, they hid behind a tree, they hid behind a bush. And so they thought, oh, nobody's watching me. So they took the fruit. And at the end of the day, everyone came back empty-handed, except one person, one student. And then so the teacher asked the student, why haven't you eaten your fruit? And he said, Gurudev, how can I eat? Everyone's looking at me. The insects, the 10 directions, the sun and the moon. So the teacher was very pleased. He was actually the one that understood the lesson, that we can't hide from Krishna. And when we lose a lower taste for a higher taste, that's a very good thing. Let's say you like to cook, but instead of cooking meat, instead of cooking fish and eggs, you cook boga, and then you prepare it, and then it becomes prasad, and we take it. And Maharaj, he was once telling me that when he was going on book distribution, he would see restaurants, and people would have fish on their plate, like a live fish. And then Maharaj says, look at that, the eyes are looking at you. So he was very disgusted, and Maharaj actually said it was cruelty. The fishes are simply also trying to live their life. They're trying to provide food for their family. They're trying this and that. So they're also living entities. But unfortunately, a lot of people, they don't believe that animals have souls in them. They believe only human beings. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that people have. And when people approach me on book distribution and they tell me, how do you know there's a soul in the body? And I tell them that everything has a characteristic. Fire is characterized by heat and light, and the soul, it actually has two symptoms, which is consciousness and life. As soon as the soul leaves the body, it becomes a dead corpse. It no longer moves. It doesn't move or do anything. So the soul, it was animating the body. And it says that he does not like to eat anything that is not offered to Krishna. And the devotees here, the first thing they'll ask you is, has it been offered yet? So it's a good practice. When I was traveling with Damodar Kumar Prabhu, we didn't have prasad, so we would go to a store and we would just take maybe bananas or apples, some simple fruits. And he would have a picture of Srila Prabhupada, the Panchatattva, Shishirara Giridhari. And we would offer our prasad to them. We'd wait a few minutes and then we would take. It's a good practice. And Srila Prabhupada mentions that the system, that in God's creation, everyone is given sufficient foods. And they will not take as much as you require. And it's a natural way. The elephant, it can eat 100 pounds of food, but if you give it 200, it won't eat. And so similarly, the pigeons, it'll only take a few grains, and then it doesn't stalk for the next day or anything like that. And it says that a devotee does not like to go anywhere if Krishna is not involved. The example that I like to use are my old friends. Before I became a devotee, I really thought we had so many things in common. And after I'm still trying to become a devotee, when I visited them, I found out that I had nothing in common with them. Nothing. So it's very difficult for me to even associate with them. So you give up old friends and you make new friends. And I'm so glad that I made friends with the devotees, because the devotees, they're real, meaning they're very, they care about you, they care about your bhakti, they care about your sadhana. And it says that he cannot be offensive to anyone because he knows that the super soul is within the heart. Such a person is never entangled in the reactions of work. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, "You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty." When I first started going on book distribution, I was kind of lamenting, like, oh, I'm not very good at book distribution. I was only managed to collect this much. And Ramapati Prabhu, we were going on a walk, and he reminded me of this verse. We have the right to perform our duty, but we're not entitled to the results of it. So after that day, I said, okay, Krishna, however you want me to be an instrument, please guide me. So from that moment on, I never worried too much about the how much I collected, things like that. And I spoke to Maharaj this morning, and he said that the 6 Goswamis and also Srila Prabhupada, they also measured things. How many books were going out? How many how many rounds are you chanting? So we do measure things to see how successful you are, but we don't make that a priority. A businessman, a karmi, he may try to sell something, and if it doesn't go his way, he becomes very morose. But a devotee, he's still out there doing, distributing books. He's not getting paid or anything like that. So sometimes the people, they see that and they get inspired. So they say, hey, what are these books about? I want to have what you have. So this is actual happiness, inner happiness. And Srila Prabhupada, he uses the example of a lotus flower in water. Although it's in water, it's not connected to it. If you put a drop of water on the leaf of a lotus, it slips. It's transcendental. So similarly, although we're performing all these activities in this material world, we should also be transcendental. We shouldn't be too attached to the success or failure of it. And we stop at 7:40? Okay. Thank you very much. Is there any questions, comments? No? Okay. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for tolerating me. Hare Krishna. So